people are realizing just how many people were living off the government, right? The government is supposed to live off the people, not the other way around. Yet we have local politicians here, several in our local state legislature, that keep crying and whining about, oh, they're cutting this, they're gutting you for that. No, they're stopping spending for money we don't have.
Welcome to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. David, I thought we were done 2 weeks ago. One more blast from nature. Did you make it through this last storm okay?
Yeah, it was fun driving through the slush and snow and then going home to shovel one more time in mid-March here. I guess the groundhog is having fun with us, right?
Yeah. Well, nice weather coming up over the weekend. Hopefully this will all be in the rearview mirror. I'll tell you what's just getting fired up now is March Madness. We've got two local teams, of course, Creighton and UNO. I guess they're branded Omaha University for the tournament. Do you have a favorite?
Well, obviously UNO is a 15 seed, and as we're recording this, the games haven't started. So by the time this hits the airways, the first round. I think they drew
St. John's. That's a tough draw in the first round. The Big East
15
champion.
and 2s, matchups. I think there's 11 of them that have won in the history of the tournament versus 145 that have lost. So probably not really good odds, but great for them to see them get there. Well, what was fun is, and again, I don't have a dog in this race, so I think Duke looks pretty strong this year overall. Yeah. But I will tell you is I saw a video of John Gruden, the former Buccaneers.
Okay.
Super Bowl coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Raiders and et cetera. But I guess he kind of said something on Twitter about University of Omaha, Nebraska.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, they sent him a whole package of logoed gear, sweats, sneakers, and a trash can. They actually sent the trash can, which they beat.
The trash can, and so, the trash can, part of their ritual.
He got a lot of play on Twitter, having fun. So I think it's great that these kids are at least going to have a great experience. And kudos to UNO for making the dance.
That's
that's
great.
a big deal when our beloved University of Nebraska, Lincoln, of course, is a high seed in the third tier tournament, the crown tournament or whatever.
Yeah. Creighton got a tough draw in Louisville. A lot of experts say Louisville should have been seated higher, and that's a real tough draw for Creighton. We'll see what happens there. Hey, David, last call for the psychology of retirement. We have 2 screenings Monday at Village Point, Marcus Village Point Cinema, Monday, March 24th, 4:30 and 6:30. Quick thumbnail description for us of Psychology of Retirement.
Great documentary narrated by Morgan Housel, New York Times bestseller. He's got a couple of books on that list that just kind of explains what people are facing in retirement. And they actually interview real baby boomers that are featured in the movie, and there's people in varying degrees of success in their savings that just discuss what it looks like, the apprehension they feel. And then they show you some tools that you can utilize. By the way, all the tools you see in the movie, we do actually use right here in our office daily. But the idea is just to educate the public to get prepared for retirement. 60% of Americans, Chip, could not even pay a $1,000 bill if emergency struck this week. And that is a sad state of affairs. And we need people to take responsibility and start saving, for themselves, for their future, et cetera. Stop. Don't think that someone else is going to do the work for you.
It's like all of our offerings. There's no charges, no obligation, but you do need to register. We need to know if you're coming. We need to have enough seats in the theater. 402-369-7777. 402-369-7777. Or go to retiresmartnow.com and you can register online. retiresmartnow.com. One more scheduling note, that digital asset workshop that got wiped out by the storm that came through 2 weeks ago has been rescheduled for Thursday, April 9th. We had 50 people, David, signed up for that, and I think we've got most of them rescheduled. But if you haven't, or if you want to catch it this time around, Thursday night, April 9th, right here in the Midwest Learning Center at Retire Smart, Digital Asset Workshop. Again, 402-369-7777, or you can go to retiresmartnow.com, go to our website, and register online. All right, into the news we go. David, you sent the team a chilling chart about mortgage refinance rejections, and am I looking at this right? Almost half of all refis are being rejected these days. I hear echoes of 2008 when something like that comes up.
Yeah, this is the highest in well over a decade. This chart goes back 12 years. And yeah, we're like 42% of all mortgage applications denied. So this is either, now there's a couple reasons, either lack of credit, lack of income, to cover said debt you're trying to refinance or take on, or the asset didn't appraise, right? So there's, that you're trying to finance. So there's three different ways you can get turned down. Either the asset you're using as collateral does not appraise at the value you're asking for, your income to debt ratio does not qualify you, or just your credit score says, no, you're not worthy. And all those are going in the wrong directions. Asset levels are going down. We're seeing real estate soften, so the prices are going down. Income growth is going down. Wage deflation is starting, and more people are getting delinquent, which means worse credit scores are on the horizon, right? And we've talked about that in credit card debt, auto loans, et cetera, and now mortgages are getting behind. In fact, I've got another chart I sent early this morning that talks about just how far behind people are getting. Foreclosures are at a 6-year high. And that is scary. So, and pre-foreclosure activity, Liz Pendens, as they call them, they file in the courthouse, hey, we're going to start taking action. And that is expected to escalate. And it's just now been uncovered via Doge that we've had about 6 million homeowners, Chip, that have gotten mortgaged in the last 3 years and haven't made a payment. And they were being covered by the government.
Like 2008.
Yeah. And so these people are going to walk away from their homes if they actually have to start making payments. They were given deferments, or the government was in fact covering them, which should make you as John Q. taxpayer pretty upset. It does make me pretty upset.
Keep thinking of the movie The Big Short, but now maybe here, okay, here's a glass half full attempt. Maybe it's good that bad refinancing propositions are being rejected, or that the foreclosures are happening. At least, is this an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure?
Yes.
Or are we still getting into dangerous territory?
Well, we're going to go through some pain, right? But the faster we go through the pain, the easier the wound heals, right? And the longer we keep trying to stretch it out and not treat the problem.
Which is what happened in 2008.
Correct.
Nobody wanted to face the truth of what was happening.
And I think that's what's different about this administration. While we know the playbook of Congress has been for the last, 5 or 6 crises we've had going back the last 15 years, print money, send it to the American public in one way or the other, right? Bail people out. No mas. We have $36.5 trillion of debt, and we need to get it under control, or the country will eventually go bankrupt. And then you want to talk about real problems, look at Venezuela, look at other countries that have gone fiscally irresponsible route. And once you get to that point of no return, it's pretty scary. So you have a pretty smart fellow in Scott Bessert running the Treasury now, and they are adamant that they're trying to get these things under control. You cut spending, you raise revenues, right, and you lower costs. And that's what they're trying to do.
David, there's an index put out by the University of Michigan that we've checked in on numerous times in the past, and you shared some of the latest information. It's about consumer expectations. And I still, to me, it's counterintuitive. It's a disconnect or something. Well, Donald Trump's back in the presidency. We're going to come roaring back economically. But consumer expectation is down, like record down. What's happening?
Well, people are realizing just how many people were living off the government, right? The government is supposed to live off the people, not the other way around. Yet we have local politicians here, several in our local state legislature, that keep crying and whining about, oh, they're cutting this, they're gutting you for that. No, they're stopping spending for money we don't have. Very simple math, right? Where are you going to pay for said benefit? That's what I ask every politician. Just show me where you're going to pay for it. Oh, we're going to tax the rich. And again, we just shared it on the show 2 weeks ago. The top 1% are paying 46% of every tax dollar collected by the federal government. 46%, the top 1%, Chip. That's up from 41% when Trump's tax cuts got enacted back in 2017. The top 10% are 76% of every tax dollar that's collected. And that is up about 6% over that same time period. So this is nonsense that you can just, but it's populist. We're going to tax the rich. No, we have to get our fiscal house in order. We need to have just a blunt conversation. We should do a whole YouTube video on that. What is the purpose of the federal government? What functions should they actually do? And the rest should go back to the states. End of story.
Mushing through the slush on my way into work this morning, I heard a quick soundbite from Elon Musk, because there's another court going after him saying you can't do what you're doing. And so the interviewer says, well, what do you have to say to that? And he said, basically, I'm paraphrasing, he said, this ship of America is going to go down unless we jettison all this extra baggage, fraud, waste, spending. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. So it's quite a tug of war that's happening right now.
It is. And again, you're going to hear all kinds of white noise and nonsense about this. But the consumer sentiment is telling you, because people recognize this, right? We had the majority of Americans voted for this by far. And it's still, as far as the last poll I saw, 74% approval of what's going on with Doge and the government cutting expenses. It's just common sense is coming back to reality, which is great to see. But this also means people realize that, hey, the free lunch is over. Job cuts are coming across multiple industries. We've talked about it for a while. So people looking out realize they're going to have to cut their spending, which tells me we have a recession most likely coming.
Well, speaking of coming back to reality, and there is no free lunch, we've only got about a minute, David, but I want you to explain this chart that shows the rubber is starting to meet the road when it comes to paying off the debt. 30 trillion, 35 trillion, 40 trillion. Just keep running up more. No, eventually you have to start paying the bills. And you shared with the team some data showing the pain that's coming in actually paying off our debt.
Right. So we're deficit spending at about $2.3 trillion this year. We have $7.4 trillion that is maturing in debt now. That has to be what we call rolled. This debt is maturing, so we have to issue new debt to pay those bondholders off at maturity. So we have to issue so that's about 9.6 to 9.8 trillion, give or take a few dollars based on what interest rates are, that has to get financed in this calendar year. But because of when the maturity is, Chip, almost 5 trillion of that is in the next 90 days. It's happening right now. March, April, and May are the biggest months. And this was all the fault of former Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. And I talked about it extensively the last couple of years. She was financing everything on short-term notes or T-bills, 2 years or less, knowing that she was going to get through the election. They were hoping that the other side won. She was clearly for the other side in the last election. But now all this debt is due. And Trump now has to deal with this, right or wrong, and he realized that. And again, Scott Bessert's the smartest guy to ever hold the position, in my opinion, of Treasury Secretary. Janet Yellen's probably the lowest IQ to ever hold that position from the people I've analyzed. And so very opposite. He realizes we got to finance this, which is why he's trying to get yields down. And again, they're down. The 10-year Treasury note is down about 50 basis points or so since the election, but they need it down another 50 basis points immediately. And, they can't force that to happen. But if job losses continue to escalate, the Fed will have some leeway to lower rates on the short end of the curve, but the bond market is going to price the long end of the curve. You just need to understand, if we have to roll this debt, Chip, at north of 4%, which is what it says we'll have to do today, where rates are, that's an additional $800 billion in interest per year from where we are right now. So that deficit spending will be $3 trillion, right? So we need Doge to gut faster, harder, and yes, break a few eggs making the cake.
Up next, David Brooks is great, but it takes a team to do what we do at Retire Smart. We welcome back to our show a vital member of that team. Financial advisor Mike Schudel joins us next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. One of our most popular classes is Estate and Tax Planning in Retirement. Another round of those classes is fast approaching, and the main presenter is with us today. David, please welcome financial advisor Mike Schudel.
Hey, thank you, Chip. Yes, once again in the studio, our resident authority on estate planning, one of our most successful financial advisors, and the advisor who's got more letters behind his name than anyone I've ever met. Literally now with the latest certification you picked up, SEPA, I believe you officially have more letters than are in the alphabet behind your name.
There's no X in there, I don't think. But
so, yeah.
Maybe they'll make one for
I'm
me.
just counting. You got more than 26. If we add them all up, you got more than 26 letters,
we'll
right?
See.
So
I don't know.
8 or 9 certifications. I don't even can't keep up. But anyway,
I read good.
You are a learned man. All right. And we love to have you come in occasionally and talk about, well, one, we have one of our most successful classes, very popular, tax and estate planning, that you put on with Colin Kastrick, who's an actual practicing estate planning attorney. And again, for disclosure for our audience, Mike does have a JD, did earn his Juris Doctorate, has a law degree, does not practice law, etc. But he's an extremely competent financial advisor and very well versed in these areas. So we have a class coming up that is going to be next week. When are the dates on that?
Yeah, Tuesday, March 25th at 6:30 p.m. and Thursday, March 27th at 6:30 p.m.
So either Tuesday or Thursday, 25th, 27th, 6:30 p.m. Call the office or go to the events page, retiresmartnow.com, and you can register. But you must register so we know how many people. It's very, very popular class and does fill up. So today, really, I just wanted to kind of jump in, Mike, and briefly get get down to some basics, because recently, actually, I was driving in to the office this morning and heard an advertisement for another financial planning firm that's offering a free will and trust if you do business with us. So what is the value of that?
Probably worth every penny.
Yeah. So I think that's so true. If you're getting your will done for free, it's exactly, it's probably worth it, right? Why would you do this? I mean, just from the outset, right? Now, and what I want to talk about today is will versus trust and who needs what, right? Because a will is not very expensive to have done competently by an estate planning attorney, by a professional, dotting your I's, crossing your T's. Why would you want to save several $100s to maybe $1,200 on the high end or something for a basic estate package, when you've saved $500,000, $2 million, $5 million or more, and you're going to put your family through a lot of pain and a lot of additional expense if you haven't done this correctly, right?
Right. Yeah. I put it this way, nobody likes to pay professional fees. They're, it's an investment you're making, but for heaven's sakes, why would you work a lifetime killing yourself day in and day out at a job, saving money for your future, and then let's either just, pay a couple $100 for something we print off the internet and hope it works out, or like you said, I just would be concerned about the free aspect of it. So I'm an example. I paid for an estate plan. I had a trust by a smart attorney, but he wasn't an estate planning attorney. So it was like going to a general practitioner when you need brain surgery. Not your best bet.
No, you need a specialist in each of these areas. And again, we do not practice law, but we have at least 3 members of the team. I'm thinking of, if there's a fourth, 3 of you guys have law degrees. None of you practice law. My brother Lou is one of those. Our compliance officer, and actually Chip Maxwell, the co-host of this very show. And just full disclosure, my brother Lou is a fully licensed attorney here in the state of Nebraska and in Virginia, and does serve as our general counsel. He just doesn't do estate planning. You guys have all gone to law school, have all been trained on the basics of this, but yet none of you do it day in and day out. And so, of course, we do recommend estate planning attorneys. We have several at our disposal. The one we most frequently talk about is Colin Kastrick, and because he's a frequent guest of this show, but he's not the only one we'll refer to as well. If you have a specific need, or there's specific reasons we might refer to you. But let's talk about the basics. What is a will, right? And you go into this extensively in the class, but just generally, what is the will?
It's basically giving directions on how you want your assets handled at the time of your death. Where are they going?
So you're hoping when you're gone, we follow your will or your intentions, right, a la a will, to do what you want. Now, then let's talk about the difference from there, stepping up to a trust. And some people think, I heard I need a trust. And the reality is, I'd say 40% of our clients need trust, probably 60% do not. Can you kind of speak to that?
I would generally agree with that. It's hard to quantify these things per se, but Nebraska, of all jurisdictions, has actually some very favorable laws on how to transition your assets at the time of death. So if you have a good will and you have your powers of attorney, can't emphasize enough to have that. Everybody should have power of attorney so that if they become disabled, there's instructions.
You should have one for both for healthcare and financial, right? The 2 main ones you want there. And it doesn't have to be the same person you're giving this power of attorney to. So like I am the power of attorney on some financial matters for both my parents, but my sister and brother have the healthcare financial power. And that makes sense, right? They're closer to them, et cetera. So
it's just one of those things where I feel like, and hey, this is just my perception, who knows, but it feels like certain things are just touted more and more these days. For example, Medicare Advantage plans, go get one of those. Hey, they're great for some people, not for others.
Yeah, a lot of people finding out the hard way that that's not the right choice.
Just pump the brakes, go get yourself educated. And that's why we offer free classes on all this stuff. But trusts, powerful legal instruments, something that I have because I own a farm that I want to be taken care of after I die. But in the absence of that, I don't have kids, I don't have a wife, I would not have a trust. Not right now.
No, and my wife and I have multiple trusts. We have a much more complicated setup as it currently is. I have 2 grown children, have no grandchildren, et cetera, same thing. But every 2 or 3 years, in fact, Colin just called me, hey, it's time to update, right? Because the net worth of my estate changes, right? It grows over time, as everyone's does, and the complications grow. Now, I currently run 4 different companies that I'm the sole owner of that are all $1 million plus revenue companies, right? So it gets complicated when you start putting this together, and whether someone's a business owner or they just have, they just been saving, they got 800,000 in the 401k. You need to have the documentation for all these things, from a spouse to spouse if you're married, transfer, right, to make sure the transition's correct, and then from the remaining spouse to your beneficiaries, whether it's your kids, your favorite charities, or whoever, and or if you don't have children like you do, right? We need to make sure you're choosing who would be the beneficiary, whether it's a charity or a person you want to bless. But unfortunately, here in Nebraska, we are a good transition state, but we do have, and of course, there's some legislative made to take, but we're one of 6 states that still charges a freaking inheritance tax, right?
It's frustrating. Yep.
So the trust, the advantages, and you go over this again in the class, is really, you know what? You want to keep all your stuff private? It's a good way to go, right? Because the trust will keep it out of the court system, where if you do not have a trust, if you have a will, if you have a complicated assets that are going to flow through that will, all that is information that is now public.
Correct.
Goes through the probate court. Anyone can go look it up. Now, let's talk about the reason why someone may only need a will. So if they have only traditional retirement accounts, 401k, IRAs, et cetera, they can leave a designated beneficiary on said account, and that passes immediately probate free to the beneficiary.
True. That's also true for your home, your
right,
cars.
and then here in Nebraska, you can do transfer on death deed, TODD, in Nebraska. 24 or 26 states, I forget. It's about half of the states allow this, but you must file, and you need an attorney here in the state of Nebraska to file that for you. Again, all these are the reasons. So you could have a multi-million-dollar estate pass quickly and efficiently in Nebraska without a trust. Now, if you have what are non-retirement assets, if you have non-qualified assets that have amounted to something, you own land, farmland, as you do, businesses, rental properties, just have a joint checking account or that has a decent amount of money in it, or stocks and a couple $1 million portfolio. These are things you might want to consider for not only for asset transfer, but also for asset protection, right? Liability protection. We can talk about where you can have an LLC created for a lot of these passive assets like the farm, and then that LLC can be owned by the trust. Again, you cover all this stuff in the class. So again, when is this class? I know we're running out of time here.
Yeah, it's next Tuesday. That's the 25th at 6:30 p.m. here in our office, or next Thursday, March 27th at 6:30. And they're the same content, so you only need to come to one, but we'd sure like to see some people come and attend.
Yeah, you do need to register, though, because it will run at retiresmartnow.com. Find the events page or give the office a call. Mike, we are out of time this week. Thanks so much for stopping in.
Yeah, thank you very much, David.
All right, Chip, hey, what do we have next?
Up next, you have questions. David Brooks has answers. Q&A is next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. Into the Q&A we go, David. Some more questions from the State of the Market event that we had in February. This one is about investment strategy. Have the changes taking place since the change in presidential administration prompted you to change your overall strategy? If so, what are those changes, and what should we be thinking about as we head into 2025?
Well, we have made changes, but it's not necessarily off the presidential shift. It's off the economic data. We knew, regardless of who won this election, we were going to face some serious headwinds. The debt we talked about in the previous segment, et cetera, is one of them. And so, yes, we have made changes as that data has unfolded. And actually, about 2 weeks ago, we took a substantial portion of equities off the table for a lot of our clients. In other words, de-risking the portfolios. Again, we don't step out of the market completely. We're just logically understanding the idea. In fact, we sent a video out to our clients telling them the probability of a lower market in the near term is much higher than a higher market or new all-time highs. And so we just prudently make adjustments to the portfolios to give our clients the outcomes they desire. Again, you can't just run away and put the money under the mattress. I joke about Melissa's mattress money all the time, my wife's idea of a financial plan. But you can be prudent and understand and read the tea leaves to simply know when it's more appropriate to take more risk or less risk to try and beat inflation and taxation with your assets.
Next question, David, is about pre-tax conversions. At what age should one not convert pre-tax accounts? Age 73? Is there a limit or ratio beyond which we should not convert?
So as far as an age, no, there's really no age limitation to when you should convert. For younger folks, we instead of converting, we want to show them how to start putting money in tax-free accounts at an early age. And so those dollars can compound tax-free for decades, right? So you get a 22-year-old to start funding a Roth IRA, it just doing what he can fund every year, $6-7 grand in a Roth IRA. If he just funds it for 10 years, Chip, at age 22 and stops at age 32, it's $1 million when he's 72, based on what the S&P has done historically. And it's all tax-free. That's huge, right? So understanding the power of compounding tax-free, how powerful that is. Now, when it comes to the age, right, the reality is the older you are, the less you may save if tax rates go up in the future, because we have less time left in your life expectancy. However, the savings pass to your children, to your beneficiary, if you're not going to spend all your money. And rarely do our clients walk out of here with the checkbook balancing at zero, right? So it makes sense at any age. We had a client who was 91. We did a very large conversion for. Actually cost that particular client additional taxation when we did it than they would have otherwise paid in their lifetime. But now all the assets were compounding and stayed in a tax-free account that their children can inherit with no RMDs and grow for another 10 years tax-free. Again, you got to understand all the facets we're looking at. Who do you want me to benefit, right? One of the questions I always ask clients. So it may make sense for at any age to do Roth conversions. It just depends on if you care about your kids and them getting more dollars or less dollars. And some people don't care, frankly, and I understand that. But again, this is where you work with a competent professional who will design the plan detailed to what you want the outcome to be.
Next question, David, is about the reliability of data. How do you know the truth about the numbers and other data that come out of the White House? This reminds me, David, Strider Elas,
Yep.
our September speaker, who came, last September. This was an issue that came up because we complain here on this show about the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and a month or two later, oh, never mind, we didn't create all those jobs and so forth. Numbers that people, then we find out about insiders leaking numbers to certain entities, it's
Still no one arrested.
Well, and I remember that Strider Elas at the time said, I'm not in the conspiracy camp yet. I still rely on the government's numbers. But that was back in
his
September.
boss, the senior economist, Brian Westbury, about 2 months after that said, look, we're having some trouble believing some of these numbers out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, on the job numbers, which we talked about on the air. Yeah.
So where are we these days, David?
Listen, we have to rely on them reasonably as data, because it's the data that they put out. And it's not just the White House, so let's be clear, too. It's from any government agent, the Federal Reserve, think tanks, the CBO, Congressional Budget Office. There's a lot of data that we go to and rely on to make decisions based on what we see. And some of it's not from the government. Some of it's from universities, the University of Michigan, we talked about earlier. They have consumer sentiment, the forecasting, all kinds of data points that Stanford University, Wharton School of Finance, all these universities put out some really unique data. And then there's data we rely on from some investment and strategists and houses, et cetera. Again, what we do is take all this data and kind of filter it through our lens and then apply it at least to probability of outcome. What is the probability of an outcome? And make decisions based on it. As I said earlier, we took risk off the table a little bit. We slightly moved some equity exposure from the majority of our clients into short-term fixed income a few weeks back, because the probability of lower markets is what we see in the near term. Again, it's probability. We don't know what's going to happen. Anybody's telling you they can tell for sure is absolutely crazy. But all we can do is rely on the data and then use as many data points as we can to come to a consensus of what we believe is going to happen.
Okay, that last point you just said, use as many data points as possible. To me, that's the takeaway for listeners and viewers on YouTube, that we don't rely on any one source. You said at the beginning of the show, that movie, The Psychology of Retirement, all the software programs and analytical tools showcased in that movie, we utilize. So, we've got different layers, and we come at it from different directions. So even if there is one number that turns out to be not so great, that's not going to sink whatever
instance,
the approach is.
At the state of the market, I showed a slide that, and I wish I had preface this knowing this question was coming today, but I showed a slide that showed the valuation of the market, 20 different common ways to value the generalized stock market. And 19 of the 20 showed it was excessively overvalued by double digits, right? And so that's one of those, hey, I'm taking 20 different data points to come to a consensus of, we are probably going to have to reset equity prices this year, right? So, and that's what we're talking about. We're not beholden to any one data point, and we're willing to change our opinion if data proves us wrong.
Let's squeeze in one more, David. This is about the prospective or potential Doge refund. Would an Elon Musk $5,000 tax refund be inflationary?
Absolutely it would, and that would be nonsense, and I would absolutely say we should not do that. Any savings for Doge should go directly to the Treasury to pay down debt. That's what I voted for, and I think that's the majority of Americans voted for. Nobody needs free money from the government because it's not free, right? And as we found out, that is pure inflationary. If we sent out $5,700, Chip, during 3 different bills between Trump and Biden in a period of about 22 months, $5,700 average the American household, and we created the inflation that went to 9%. This would do the same thing. That would be a catastrophic mistake.
Well, I think I recall, because this surfaced a few weeks ago in our conversation here, and you said if there is such money, put it to debt reduction.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
Pay down our debt.
Up next, a growing number of states are trying to eliminate the property tax. We'll explore that next on Retire Smart with David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. David, I know I've heard you say, I don't like paying for my house again through property taxes over 15 years or so. And legislators in other states are starting to see it similarly. Here's a headline from Fox Business. Several states seek to end property taxes. And the quote from one of the state legislators is, shouldn't have to rent from the government. What do you think, David? I'll tell you what, I love this, David, as long as the burden doesn't just get shifted to state income or state sales tax.
Well, I would argue against that. I say it absolutely should shift to sales tax. That's a consumption-based tax, and that's fair. You spend money, you pay money, right? Florida, my old home state, where I still own property today, I have to pay property taxes. However, when I lived there, I never paid income tax. It's unconstitutional by the state of Florida's constitution. They cannot charge income tax. So they only have, so people say, oh, it's a 3-legged stool. You got to have all 3 legs to balance the tax budget, right? Yeah. Property taxes, income tax, and sales taxes. Well, no. Florida, you only have 2 of those legs, and the stool not only stands, it's much more stable than most states with a surplus.
I think we have to throw
year.
out the stool analogy. That just doesn't even really apply.
Well, maybe we're talking about a different kind of stool because when it comes to legislators, but anyway.
Well, easy.
So
don't give the compliance officer heartburn.
The reality is exactly, why should you have to pay for something you've already paid for? Yeah. So not only that, in multiple states, once you've purchased a new car, the sales tax has been paid on that product that has been created. When you sell it as a used car, why do we pay sales tax again? That item has already been tariffed or taxed. The tax has been paid. I believe that's unconstitutional. So we need states to understand that. One, keep spending under control. But I have no problem. Whatever the burden is, it should be in a consumption-based tax because that's the fairest way that brings illegal activity into the tax pool as well. So you get tax dollars you are not getting today from people that are doing illicit or illegal activities in your commerce in your marketplace. They go to this grocery store. They put gas in their car. They go to restaurants. They buy clothes, etc. Why not collect the tax where it's a fair and equitable way to do it?
Now, the critics will say, yeah, but if you load up on the sales tax, that's the most regressive. You know, the poor struggling person faces the same sales tax that Warren Buffett does.
You are absolutely correct to a point. So therefore, most states that are instituting this type of tax have a prebate, if you will, up to a poverty line, et cetera. So whatever the line is, hey, 25 grand.
Well, most versions of the fair tax or the consumption tax also include this feature that you're describing right now.
Correct. Like here in Nebraska, we had the EPIC tax. Now, it didn't go through last time, but there's still folks that are pushing it, and we've had presentations right here on the EPIC tax. That is a consumption-based tax. That would eliminate corporate tax here, it would eliminate income tax here, and it would eliminate property taxes, and we would go with a consumption-based tax. Now, by my math, it has to be 10 to 11%. The proponents of the EPIC tax were telling us it's like 7.4. I don't believe that. We have a sales tax close to that now, so I think we have to make that up. But I would much rather pay 12% sales tax, Chip, and have no other taxes in the state of Nebraska. I don't know about you, but that would be pretty fair.
Well, if there were no other taxes. See, that's why I don't necessarily like even the tax shift, because the burden on me is going to be the same. I still want the impetus to reduce government, but The other thing that used to
Well, then
burn
maybe
me,
the legislators, which you used to be a former member of, should
Yeah.
put a cap on what these local governing bodies can raise millage or tax, even tax dollars. Hey, you can't charge more than a 3% raise on said taxes on your constituents.
and generally there are caps. Now, the localities have the right to override them, which school districts are often successful in getting enough voters out to override
Which
those.
is crazy. School spending here in Nebraska is up 1,700% in the last 40 years. 1,700%, Chip. Student count is down. Explain that math to me. We teach less students today, yet we've gone up 1,700% in expenditures.
I had the charts and graphs as a state senator showing people, and it didn't seem to matter. One last shot on this property tax idea, David, is that I found, as a county commissioner and as a state senator, I lost track of the number of phone calls, emails, personal face-to-face conversations with people on the property tax. Talk about regressive. That is a flat tax that is assessed without regard for ability to pay. Okay?
Or services delivered.
Senior citizens in the same home for 20, 30 years on a fixed income, and their valuation has, doubled or more. And they say, well, my income hasn't, know, and yet you're still subject to. Now, sometimes there's a homestead exemption and a few, but I've long thought the property tax
and
was
it's an
just as
arbitrary value
regressive.
that they're creating this tax on. We believe your house is worth X. Well, maybe, but they never seem to go down, Chip, when houses go down. And housing is going to go down.
You've noticed that.
7 to 9% nationwide this year. Do you think your property tax is going to do that?
Right.
I guess not. Now, speaking of those taxes, right? States are learning people want them to be more responsible as the Doge and the government now, and that's why these property taxes. We're also seeing this in the corporate tax world.
Well, right before we sat down to do this show, you shared with me a story about, Delaware used to be the haven in the domestic United States. You don't have to go to the Cayman Islands or someplace. Just set up shop in Delaware for your most advantageous situation as a business. But now Facebook, Meta, I think, is talking about leaving Delaware.
Yeah, and this all, and in full disclosure, I have a corporation that is incorporated in Delaware. It protects shareholders and the corporate governance, et cetera, better. That's why it's recommended there. However, that is quickly changing. So it started with, if you remember, we talked about this last year, Tesla. Elon Musk took no salary as the CEO and said, if I hit these outrageous sales targets and valuation of the company, then I'll get paid in stock. Over 80% of the shareholders voted yes to his pay package, and it was unbelievable targets he set to hit it. Otherwise, he didn't get paid anything. Well, he hit those targets, and so he earned, I believe it was about $60 billion in pay or compensation in stock. And of course, the stock is down, so that'd be less money to him. It's in stock. He's willing to take it in the value of the stock. The court, a minority shareholder, said, no, that's not fair. And the courts in Delaware upheld it. An activist judge upheld it, saying, no, even though you're incorporated here in the most protective state, and even though your shareholders voted and approved this, not once, but twice, we're disavowing it and you can't receive the pay. So what did they do? They upped and moved their incorporation from Delaware to Texas, and Elon Musk is going to get paid. Watching this happen, other big companies have noticed, and hundreds of them have already moved, but the big ones are making Delaware nervous, and their new governors take hold. So he's having meetings with companies, and the big one is Meta, Facebook, because they are already considering, and Delaware is aware of this. Delaware is gaining, I think it's $112 billion a year in just like franchise fee taxes, the corporate filings, basically, from having all these corporations all over the country. They benefit immensely. This is one of the reasons Biden got all his backing over the years of his political career, because his state was so corporate friendly. And if that's gone, look out, Delaware, you're going to have some revenue go bye-bye.
David, this next story, it's not funny when somebody gets scammed, but it's a little bit funny. Well, I thought so. Here's the headline from CNBC. AI scammers on Amazon duped investors out of millions with passive income scheme. This is the allegation being investigated anyway by the Federal Trade Commission. And well, first of all, tell us what happened. And I don't know, David. I thought there might have been a few red flags here that should have alerted people. But break this down for us.
The upfront investment was like between $45,000 and $75,000 they were pitching to people. So this is a pretty decent chunk of change. And they were going to put up storefronts on Amazon stores, and supposedly you were just going to help click through and make money through rebates, etc., from all these other retailers that were going to be listed in your store. And they just collected money from the people doing it, and then nobody got paid any money, right? And so it was a complete scam, millions and millions of dollars. Again, if it's too good to be true, folks, it's probably too good to be true. Don't try to chase the easy buck. Learn how compounding and investing over the long haul is how you actually create wealth. Don't chase these fly-by-night scammers.
Well, number one, it was on TikTok that was being promoted. That should have been a red flag. Number two, the guy flashes a picture of Warren Buffett. I mean, he's not involved in it, but he's just flashing that up there. And then number three, apparently the guy showed himself on TikTok fanning himself with big wads of cash. You know, it almost sounds like the Babylon Bee or the Onion or something.
Yeah, and if you're getting that excited about it, you just take a breath. You call a friend, right, before you commit that kind of capital.
David, Fox Business headline: White House touts dips in egg, gas prices as win for Trump's economic policy. Now, in fairness, the consumer prices have been a little slower to come down than the wholesale prices. In fact, I'm just going to throw this in there. You had the story earlier about a judge entertaining a lawsuit from a stockholder saying, I don't want Elon Musk to get paid that money that he earned per his contract. We've got this plague of rogue judges running across the land, trying to invalidate things. The Babylon Bee had a recent headline: Federal judge orders price of eggs to go back up. So I don't expect to see that happen, but there has been some movement in some of these consumer prices.
No, there's absolutely. In fact, we're in disinflation right now. So we talked about CPI would go lower. We called it correctly at 2.8. We predicted that over a month out. And we see it actually going down in the 2.5, 2.6 handle here next month. So we are seeing prices come down across the board. And disinflation can be a scary thing if out of control, just so you know. But that's part of the economic times we're going to go through. There are certain areas that are still seeing inflationary, and you're going to see small. We talked about before, tariffs are very short-term temporary bumps, but the free market works them out very quickly. We talked about that last week. But we do believe inflation is headed down significantly from here. And if you cut government spending and don't send the savings out to the American consumer, you will have much lower inflation, and that will give the Fed some relief to be able to lower interest rates, as the current administration is desperately seeking them to do. But they need the bond market to go lower, and you're going to see that from pain in the equity markets and the housing market and real estate prices fading. Flight to quality will ensue, and interest rates will go down.
That'll do it for this week, folks. Please visit our website, retiresmartnow.com, and click Attend an Event at the top of the page to see everything we currently offer. No charge, no obligation for our events, but you do need to register. You can do it online or by calling 402-369-7777. David, bring us home.
Hey, have a blessed and prosperous week. But if you were at Creighton's game before the tournament started, you might have seen our own advisor, Brad Starkin, win Pop a Shot and go into the national championships. Congrats, Brad.
We'll let you know how that turns out. Meanwhile, thank you for listening to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. For David Brooks and the entire team at Retire Smart, have a great week.